Welcome. I am so glad that you were able to make it today to discuss Bailey's Key Math 3 assessment results, some observations I have, as well as some recommendations I have for Bailey moving forward and up in the world now that she's going to be going into high school. Bailey's in the 8th grade. I definitely want her feeling confident and ready for the new environment, the new teachers, and the new classes. So I hope the recommendations that I give will help her with that. So beginning the assessment, Bailey was definitely attentive and she was engaged. She made a handful of friendly conversation. I learned some fun facts about her, which was really cool, and it kept the testing light and seemed like she was comfortable and giving her best shot. It was good. She never really seemed too bored or agitated. She tended to bite her nails, but nothing too extreme. She was very curious about testing items. If something looked unfamiliar, she's never seen it before, she would make that very clear. That helped us know how she was feeling. In addition, she was doing a lot of self-corrections, which was good because a lot of her self-corrections were being self-corrected to the correct answer. So it impacted her results. But like I said, moving into high school, we want Bailey feeling really confident and saying an answer and knowing what it is and exploring it. It's good, and thinking about it is good, but we just want Bailey to be on her toes and ready for high school and those little bit of tougher math classes. Overall, even though Bailey did seem a little anxious and expressed some nervousness about some things in the subtest, some areas in the subtest, I think the results are definitely reliable and valid, considering her current levels of academic functioning. I don't think anything impacted it strongly enough to affect her results. So I do think these results are reliable and valid, and I think Bailey did well throughout this test. So we actually did the whole Key Math test. It has 3 clusters, as they call them. So it's basic concepts, operations, and applications, and all those are combined to get you a total test. But today, we're only going to talk about the 5 subtests that fall within the basic concepts. Those 5 tests include numeration, algebra, geometry, measurement, and data analysis and probability. So here are Bailey's scores, but I'm going to show you this visual representation because I think this makes a lot more sense. So here, the orange blocks are the subtests that I just mentioned before. Here's some fancy numbers that you don't need to worry too much about. And here we have our chart. So this shaded area, I shaded that in there, is where we want Bailey to be. Here are Bailey's results. You can see that numeration, unfortunately, doesn't quite make it into that shaded area. So numeration could use some work, but we'll talk about that. The other 4 subtests start below average, but they creep into the average. So this area is average ability, this area is below average, and this area would be considered above average. So we definitely want Bailey in that average range, and she is creeping into it. So that's good. We want that. But we would love for Bailey to start in that average range and move up, not be below to average. But that's what recommendations and accommodations and implications are for. So that's why we're here to talk. So we'll start with just kind of discussing the subtests and what Bailey was asked to do and how she did. The first subtest that Bailey participated in was numeration. Numeration was actually Bailey's lowest scoring subtest, as you saw from the chart. Not the end of the world, that is okay. But we are going to put some extra focus on numeration. Bailey was asked to explore things like whole and rational numbers. For example, when she was asked to put how many 10s go into 120, she got the answer 12, which was correct. She was asked to do some rounding, some fractions, some ordering of decimal values, in which she kind of struggled a little bit. Bailey struggled with simplifying fractions. For example, she was asked to simplify 4/10 and unfortunately couldn't do that. In addition to being asked one of a set of 6 to put that as a fraction, and she just gave the answer of 1 instead of giving the answer of 1/6. So fractions are definitely an area that we will work on with Bailey, and we'll talk more about that when we get into recommendations and we're done chatting about the subtests. The next subtest that Bailey participated in was algebra. And Bailey actually stuck her tongue out at the thought of this, excuse me, at the thought of this subtest. She said that she didn't really know a lot about it and she didn't really like it. And this is where she definitely started to express that things didn't look very familiar to her and she seemed a little nervous. But overall, she did well. She did well. She could do things like simple subtraction, kind of like a sequence of things. But she kind of started to fall off when she was asked to balance numbers that used multiplication, when she was asked to identify a pattern and kind of a tougher problem. She struggled with that area a little bit too. But overall, that was okay. In Bailey's geometry, this was actually one of her higher scoring subtests. She was asked to do things like analyze, describe, compare, classify, classify 2 to 3 dimensional shapes, kind of a variety of things in this geometry subtest, especially because she got pretty far down on the test. So she was asked, for one, she was asked to identify what doesn't belong. She was able to do that. She was able to identify a difference in given stick figures, and she was also able to identify parallel lines, but not perpendicular lines. The things that she wasn't really good at, or struggled a bit with, I should say, is shapes. She wasn't able to compare cube views. She wasn't able to tell which shapes would make a cube, and she also couldn't say how triangles were similar. Shapes were definitely the most apparent thing to me in the geometry subtest, and I think that we can definitely work with a recommendation and an implication that will benefit her in her future with math. The next subtest, which is the fourth one, was measurement. Bailey did okay with measurement. She had to compare items with a variety of attributes. So, for example, they had a picture of a toothbrush, and then they had some like lima beans, and she was asked how many beans long is the toothbrush. So she had to give an estimate of what she saw on the page, and she did well with that. When she got into things like money and time, she struggled a little more. Some areas of money she did well, other areas of money she struggled. For example, asked 2 coins to make 15 cents. She pointed them out immediately. When she was asked to count money on a page to get the answer of $12.48, she did it well. But when she was asked like how many quarters would make 15 dimes or how many nickels make 20 pennies, she couldn't do either of those things. So that's something that we could definitely work on and put some focus on, especially because especially because money is such a real life application. We want Bailey to feel confident using it. And the last subtest that Bailey participated in was data analysis and probability. Well, the last subtest of the basic skills cluster. She was asked to collect, display, and interpret data concepts with chance and probability. So she was asked to read and interpret some tables, interpret some tally marks. She was able to interpret a speed change in a graph as if a car was driving and they stopped. She was able to say when it stopped. She was also able to read a mileage chart as well as kind of say some likelihood questions, like probability questions. There were a few things that she struggled with, like least likely things kind of seemed tough for her, as well as like reading certain tables. But I think overall, the main things that Bailey could really focus on right now are shapes and money. I think that would help her with her skills going into the high school years. So, going down to our recommendations. Because Bailey is in the 9th percentile, I'll explain the percentile rank to you. The percentile rank indicates that the percentage of individuals who scored at or below a particular score. So, for example, because Bailey's percentile is a 9, it indicates that she scored as high or higher than 9% of students at her current academic level. So 9, it's a little low. We want to get that number up there, but I think we can. I really do. So I wanted to make that apparent to you, that her overall percentile, only for the basic skills that we just talked about, is a 9. They go up a little bit for the other subtests. Her basic skills are definitely what she needs the most help with, so that's why that is so apparent right now. So I think an area that Bailey could use some extra focus on is shapes, as I said before. At one point in the testing, she was calling them roundy things and pyramids, which is okay, but we want her to use more technical terms, especially when she's moving into those high school years and high school classes. So I think one recommendation would be offering Bailey the Geometers Sketchpad. It's an application on an iPad or a computer. It uses tangible, visual way that also increases engagement, understanding, and achievement. So Bailey will be able to manipulate shapes and fractions and patterns on the iPad to really get that to stick in her brain. And not only is that effective, students love it. And as much as we sometimes don't want them to, they do, and it works. So we have to use things that work. In addition, I think another area that Bailey will benefit that I've talked about a little bit before was her working with money. She was able to count money, but she struggled with identifying how to get a given amount of money in as few coins as possible. So we will begin with explicit instruction for sure, and I will guide her on how to make a dollar in numerous different ways, and that way she can move up and she can make multiple dollars when she knows how to make that one. So we will be using real money like bills, coins, all of it, so she gets the real feel of it, as well as I'm going to provide her a graphic organizer to organize that money if she wants to. So with the accommodations that kind of fall into those two things is that she's definitely going to be using visuals and graphic organizers, and we're definitely going to be scaffolding. As well as the intervention to address that target area, which is kind of what I was talking about before, and this is what I want to be using while we do it, is called CRA. CRA stands for Concrete Representational Abstract. So it's kind of a process in how to learn. It'll help the learner gain a conceptual understanding for the mathematics process rather than just completing an algorithm or given a problem and it's told to do it. So the concrete is where you interact and manipulate three-dimensional objects, such as geometric figures, algebra tiles, or money, like we talked about. The representational uses two-dimensional drawings to represent problems. So she begins with using the tangible things and manipulating items, and then she moves into drawing it. So she's using two visual things, but just in a different way, which is really beneficial. And then we hope to get her to that abstract point where the students solve problems with numbers, symbols, and words without any concrete representational items or assistance. So again, Bailey moving into high school, it's not always promising that she's going to be able to use those manipulatives and those visuals. It should be, and we hope it is, but we don't know the case. So we would love to get Bailey used to this and working on this before she gets up to those higher grade levels. This strategy or this intervention has been shown to be an effective approach to teaching mathematics. It relies heavily on modeling and immediate feedback, which Bailey would definitely love. Bailey wanted feedback throughout the testing period. She wanted to know if she was right. So I think she would really benefit from this. She would definitely benefit from the one-on-one instruction her and I will do together. And we can use this in any of the areas. And if Bailey prefers this method, we can use it on the other areas for the subtest as well. And I think it will get her to succeed to where she wants to be. So overall, Bailey's basic skills cluster on the KeyMath 3 was below average to average. We would love to get those numbers up a little bit, and we think we could with the help of the intervention of the CRA, as well as using some accommodations such as graphic organizers, visuals, scaffolding, and being able to physically manipulate math objects in front of her. With Bailey moving into high school, we hope she feels confident and ready, and that's what we're going to focus on. So if you have any questions or concerns, please let me know, and we hope to get Bailey on the right track for high school. Thank you so much, and I'm happy you were able to come today. Have a great one. Bye-bye.